Well, welcome to our first reading of the on-demand video presentations. And this starts out our ethics section. And this first reading is Ethics and Trust in the Investment Profession. It's a short reading. There's not a lot to it. We're going to try and define ethics. We're going to talk a little bit about why ethics are important in the investment business, a framework for making ethical decisions within the firm. So let's jump right into our definition here. Ethics, a set of shared beliefs about good, acceptable, or bad, unacceptable behavior. So that's pretty straightforward. A little surprised they use the words good and bad behavior, but works for me. And it could also be the study of good and bad behavior. Defining good and bad behavior, well, that's a little more difficult. But in the investment profession, we're really looking at conduct that balances the self-interest of the actors and the impact of the outcome for stakeholders. And we have a code of ethics with the CFA curriculum and the CFA charter. And so here they talk about the role of that code of ethics. And it says to communicate to the public that a profession's members will use their knowledge and skills to serve their clients in an honest and ethical manner. Well, that almost sounds like a piece of marketing material there. What are the challenges to ethical behaviors? Well, one, studies have shown that individuals overrate the ethical quality of their behavior. I don't think that's a shocking result for any of us. And we talk about the importance of situational or external influences. And it turns out that these situational influences have more impact, more effect on people's behavior than actually their kind of internal ethics. So you say, well, why is somebody behaving this way? It's because they don't have, they're not an ethical person. That's usually not the case. They succumb to some sort of pressures and often tell themselves a story so that it doesn't come across, or they don't have to think of it as unethical behavior. But important influences are social pressure, especially in the workplace. But social pressure can always influence behavior. Loyalty to an employer, loyalty to your supervisor or to your coworkers, all of these pressures can cause you to do things that if you just stood back and thought about it from your own ethics point of view, you probably wouldn't do. And of course, money, power, or prestige. If behaving ethically was free, I think everybody would probably go ahead and do it. But when there's money on the line, when there's power, prestige, advancement in your firms, maybe moving to a different job, a different firm based on your results, all of these pressures certainly lead to behavior that, in hindsight, is unethical. The investment industry has a special need for ethical behavior, according to this reading. And in fact, another not shocking result is there's a lack of trust in investment professionals. Now, they talk here about the impact of this on the economy and on society as kind of a justification for enforcing ethical behaviors or pursuing ethical results. Makes potential investors less likely to use investment industry services. It's kind of like when you go to buy a car. You kind of know what it's going to be like on a car lot, and you just really hesitate to go there. So if they think they're going to behave unethically, they'll be less likely to use their services, and that's bad for the investment industry as a whole. But if we look at it on an economy-wide basis, it increases the perceived risk of providing capital, right? Investing has its own set of risks, and if we overlay on top of that the risk of unethical, not truthful behavior by the providers of investment services, this adds more risk, and so this effectively increases the cost of capital and can affect the amount of investment in an economy, the allocation of resources across the economy that will have effects on the real economic outcomes. And providing incomplete or false information leads to this misallocation of capital and slower growth for the overall economy. We have to be able to distinguish between ethical and legal standards. You can think of them as overlapping, but some actions that are illegal are ethical, and some actions that are unethical are legal. And so an example might be civil disobedience. You might be breaking the law, protesting something, refusing to disperse or something like that, but many people consider that ethical behavior, but it is illegal. On the other hand, it's legal to take shares in an oversubscribed initial public offering rather than giving them to the clients, but that's considered unethical behavior. And in general, the ethical principles will set a higher standard than laws and regulations just by themselves. And our last learning outcome here is to understand a framework for ethical decision making. First, identify the facts available and identify the facts that you need. What are the ethical principles involved? Who are the stakeholders and the conflicts? Now, when we talk about stakeholders, we're talking about the employers, we're talking about the shareholders, we're talking about the customers, we're talking about the suppliers, and to some extent, the community and the society as well, and the government who has an interest in your business because they collect taxes. A second step in a framework, just an example framework, is to consider the alternatives and look at these situational influences that may be affecting decisions negatively and seek guidance from outside parties. At that point, make a decision and act on it. And as always, we need to evaluate the outcomes and monitor how things went. Were the results as intended? Were there unintended consequences? Were the ethical principles considered adequately? And so this feeds back into the system, and you can update your processes if you see weaknesses through this fourth step of evaluation of results.